All right, I think we're ready. Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our next edition on how to protect your online privacy. We're gathered to talk about digital cleanse today, and I'm very excited to discuss what that means, and I'm very excited to have you all here. I've already been watching the chat fly by. Thank you for introducing yourselves and saying hello and telling us where you are from. That is wonderful. Looks like we have a great spectrum of people here today. My name is Amira Dalla, and I work at Consumer Reports, helping manage our engagement on digital privacy programs. I am based location-wise in New York, and I'm really excited to co-host these workshops for you. I'd love for Katie, can you say hello to everyone?
Absolutely, thank you. Hi all, I'm Katie McInnes. I serve as a policy counsel on privacy and tech issues here in Washington, D.C. for Consumer Reports. And I'm very excited to talk with you all today about how you can limit or minimize your digital footprint.
Thanks, Katie. And Kimberly, would you like to say hello to everyone?
Hello, everyone. I am in the chat, so feel free to tell me hello, put questions in the Q&A where Alan is. And yeah, we're so glad to see you.
Thanks, Kimberly. And Alan, our final
Hey,
introduction.
everybody. Nice to see you all. Thank you all for being here. I'm Alan Smith, also from CR, and I'm going to be in the Q&A answering questions as they roll in. Just a quick note about how the Q&A works. You can either ask a question or you can read through and thumbs up a question. So you can sort of +1 somebody else's pre-existing question if you think it's a good one. And if enough people are voting for different questions, we'll see if we can even pitch them to the open air and see what we can come up with. So thanks for being here, everybody.
Great, thank you. As you can see, we have lots of us here today. We're very excited to jump into the different places and engage and chat with you all. So we are here in many ways to do that, and I'll explain a little bit more as we continue. Just to give you a little bit of a brief overview on the agenda. So we're going to start with an introduction, kind of understand digital privacy and digital cleanse. Then we'll get to my favorite part, which is the activities, as well as the more hands-on, really deep learning that I know a lot of you come here for, which is finding and deleting accounts and finding and deleting data. We'll have some information and some walkthroughs on those. And then we'll save about 15 to 20 minutes for a Q&A time before we do a quick wrap up. So that's our schedule for the day. And then just before we start, I really do want to go through some quick things to note. I do want to be clear that this is an overview. I know many of us are connecting online. I know there's many forms of apps and programs and tools we use while we're online. There would be much more that we could discuss if we were given the time. But since we are limited to the hour we have together, we are really going to focus on finding accounts and deleting them and finding data and deleting it. Otherwise, I would love to talk about our mental health and wellness as it relates to our privacy and being online, and all the other things that entails, like controlling screen times or others. So this is just a quick overview on one aspect, and hopefully we can go through more at later dates. I also want to say that this is very positive for our health, connecting with each other, being online, joining in groups and finding where each other are. We're not here to say don't do those. We just want to help you to be safe while you are there. And then also once you decide to leave those programs, which is the focus of today's call. I do want to let you know that we are recording. We record so that individuals who are unable to attend can watch the recording later. So this is us sharing that information when the recording becomes available. The chat will also be available, so it will be up there. So be conscious not to share any sensitive information in the chat. We have disabled video and audio of our participants, partially for your own privacy, but partially because you are a very large group and that would be very hard for us to manage in this short time. I also want to let you know that we have closed captioning. We're very happy to try and be inclusive and open and accessible wherever we can. We allow closed captioning so that it helps people keep up with us throughout the recording, whether they're watching now or later. And then also we want to hear from you. We want to hear how you're doing, how do you feel about this? And so we do encourage you to jump into the different methods of engagement that we have in the next hour. A few of those are the polls function. We'll get a first taste of that in a little bit, but really it's 30 seconds you have to vote. So make sure you're ready with those fingers And we'll go a little bit through that when we start. And then the chat function, as Kimberly mentioned, she is hanging out there. I've seen the chat zipping through already. That is a place for you to connect with each other and with us. As you can imagine, it's pretty hard for Katie and myself to be very active in the chat. So I do encourage you to chat with each other as much as you can. And a quick tip is to make sure you message all panelists and attendees when doing so. Otherwise, if you click only all panelists, it only comes to us, and then others will be able to see your wise questions and wise comments, which I know they would love to see. And like Alan mentioned, he's hanging out in the Q&A function. Please direct your questions here. And like he mentioned, there is an upvote feature where you can like other people's questions. Please do that so we know what questions are popular. And in the end of the call, in our Q&A section, we'll be sure to up-level some of the more popular questions. And lastly, we know that we are using Zoom, and Zoom has been in the news a lot recently for a lot of inappropriate behavior. And while we have changed our settings to make sure and try to prevent a lot of this inappropriate behavior, we are taking certain measures and are on watch for any inappropriate behavior while you are in this call and chat. So if you do anything inappropriate, we will take measures and we'll have to exit the chat for you as an individual. Please be respectful to us. Please be respectful to each other. That is all we ask. Okay, thank you. That is our notes section. So I'm going to pass it off to Katie, who's going to talk a little bit about digital privacy and what do we mean.
Thanks, Mira. So you may wonder why we're running a webinar on digital privacy, but if you're like me, and I imagine you are, you're spending more time than ever online or looking at screens because we're all being asked to try to minimize our time outside and around other people. And so this is a great time to take a step back and to think about what you share online and how you can help minimize the personal information that you share. So we're going to go through some steps that you can take with services that you use all the time to share less information or to delete some information. Consumer Reports is, in addition to telling you these tips, we're also working on behalf of you and all consumers to make sure that consumer protections are put into law and that companies are treating your information the way they should. For instance, we worked closely with congressional staffers on some recent coronavirus privacy bills that have been released. And we've also analyzed the privacy policies for some of the biggest video conference tool providers like Microsoft, Cisco, Zoom, and Google to see how much information they collect from you and what they do with that information. And now we're speaking with them to see if there's anything they can change to make their services more private and secure. So thanks for joining us today, and I'm excited to talk to you more about how we can minimize our digital footprint.
Great, thanks, Katie. And just thinking about our digital footprint really brings us to our topic today. So with more time spent online, we need to start thinking about our mental wellness more now than ever. I don't know about you, but I've been seeing a lot more, sometimes advertisements, getting a lot more emails. I've been sharing a lot more online. And while all of this is definitely great to connect and be integrated with friends and others in this time, it also means that I'm leaving a pretty large trail of data as I go around. And this has not been great for my mental wellness. And that's why we really came up with this topic this month to see how can we help reduce that spread and how do we take this time to potentially minimize the number of emails that are coming into our inbox, minimize the accounts that we're on, delete old ones that we might no longer be a part of, and start reclaiming our own footprints online and our own presence. So today we are here to understand what does it mean to start cleaning up our digital footprint and how we can go forward and feel a little lighter when we're online and start reclaiming ourselves. But before we start anything, we're gonna have a poll. And the first poll is asking how many apps do you have on your phone? No worries about checking your phone and clicking through and counting each one. Just feel free to give a guess. We've just put up the poll. You'll have about 20 to 30 seconds more to actually complete it. It does go quickly, although it looks like so many of you are completing it already. Feel free to just give a guess on which one is the right amount. I have to think about it, and I think I'm somewhere between 40 to 60 range. Katie, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we last talked about this, you were in the 60 plus range?
Yeah, I deleted a couple after
Oh.
our conversation, but yes, I'm in the 60 plus range, which is quite a many tools on my phone, many apps.
Yeah, we'll talk about what that means in a second. I think we're ready to close the polls. It looks like 80% of you have commented. So the largest amount of apps on the phone for this group is in the 20 to 39 range, which is actually pretty good. So we have about 23% of people in the 0 to 19 range. Like I said, 38% in the 20 to 39. 25% of you are in the 40 to 59. That's me. And 15% of you are in the 60 plus range as well. So we're seeing a little bit of a spread, and obviously this is differentiating based on each person. And the reason why we're really starting with this poll is we're just trying to think about how much data and information we're sharing on just like one device. So this is just our cell phone. And so if you're in the range of 0 to 19 apps, you have pretty much the lowest form of exposure on your phone with your information and your data. This means because your data is being kept or shared or calculated by the least amount of apps. Whereas if you have 60 plus apps, you have the highest amount of exposure, and you have all of these places that are potentially calculating your data, they're storing your data, they're using your data in other sorts of ways, even if you're not using them anymore. So if you're like Katie and realize that, wow, I have way too many apps on my phone, while I do too, it might be a good time to start looking back and clearing up some of these apps, and we're going to talk about that later. But just because you're not using them doesn't mean those apps are not working in the back end, still collecting and using your data. So there is still exposure no matter whether you've finished with them or not. Okay, great. Thanks for the first poll. We're going to have a few more come up. But before we do, Katie's just going to walk us through, like, why do we do this? Why do we delete our accounts?
Yeah, you may be wondering why I take the time to go back and delete old accounts and delete information from those accounts. Even though that information might not seem useful to you, that information is very valuable to others. It can be valuable to people who are interested in stealing your identity. It can be valuable to companies who wish to use your personal information to serve you ads or somehow monetize it in some other way. And in addition, all this information is just sitting there and vulnerable to a hack, which means that it could be released online, or your credentials could also be released online. So it's a good idea to just routinely look through the old information you have, like deleting unnecessary emails, also getting rid of old accounts that you no longer use anymore. And then it's also very important to understand that these old accounts could be accessing or speaking to other companies or other accounts. So it's very important to think about that strategically and deliberately, and think about what you want shared. You may not want this old information shared anymore, so it's a good idea to go back and delete these accounts.
All right, Katie, what do you think? Are we ready for our activity?
I think so. So this first one, our question is, when you delete an app on your phone or desktop, does it delete your account? So when you delete an app on your phone or desktop, does it delete your account? This is a good one. I'm probably going to have to think about what I did yesterday after I deleted some apps on my phone. Did I really get rid of those accounts? All right, thank you guys for voting. So 9% of you said true. Unfortunately, that's the wrong answer, but 91% of you got it correct. The answer is false. It really depends on the app, and so it's always really good to check. A good rule of thumb is if you had to create some sort of account for that app, like entering your email and a password or using Facebook, Google, or Apple to log in, then likely you've created an account and you have to go in and delete or deactivate that account in order to get rid of your information. The ones where you don't, that information is likely just stored on your phone, and deleting the account will cease your relationship with that company, get rid of that information, but it's always really good to check. And that's a good reminder for me. I should go back and check to make sure that I got rid of those accounts when I deleted those apps from my phone after I realized how many, shockingly, I keep on my phone every day.
Okay, it sounds like we have a lot of digital privacy experts based on that question. I'm curious to see how they do on the next one. So which platform does not let you delete your account? And the options are WordPress, Wikipedia, Facebook, or none. They all let you delete. And the polls are open. I know you all claim digital privacy expert status the first question, but I think this question is a little bit tougher.
It is really tough. I remember when I first saw this question, I didn't know the answer at all. And I have accounts on these sites.
Same, actually. I had to think this one through. And I don't want to give away any clues yet. I'm going to wait like a couple more seconds till we're done, and then we'll come through with the answers. All right. Perfect. So you should be seeing the answers right now. So the answer is actually Wikipedia. And about 5% of you chose WordPress. Only 12% of you chose Wikipedia, which is the right answer. 50% of you chose Facebook, which is the highest one of all the answers. And 33% of you said none, all accounts can be deleted. And so let's talk this one through a little bit. So Wikipedia, you cannot actually delete your account because it deletes all the edits and the information you put onto Wikipedia. And it means that some of the information cannot be properly attributed, which Wikipedia does not allow. So there is a little bit of a fix around where you can change your username and you can request that your user page be deleted. You would have to work closely with them, but it is not, you aren't able to actually delete your account altogether. So that one is definitely something to be aware of. In terms of the other options, WordPress used to make it very difficult for you to delete your account, but it is a lot easier now. So that one was a lot harder for people in the past. And then Facebook, which was the unanimous voted one, I believe that one often confuses people because there's a lot of news about Facebook keeping your data forever, and we've become a little bit more wary of Facebook data practices, which I very much understand. So we're often thinking that they're keeping our data forever. So when you go to the deleting your account option, you do have two options. One is disabling your account, one is deleting your account. If you disable your account, that means all your data is still there. If you delete your account, all your data is deleted. It also allows you the option to download your data, so you can do that as well. So that's just a little bit of a run-in, and we're learning as we go. This is an interesting one, but it's good to consider and know that you can't always just delete your accounts. It's not always an option.
And I know that we've used the word account maybe 50 times so far, but by account, we just mean that it's your status as a registered user of a platform or service. So all that really means is that you're saying, I'm an individual that wants to use your services or purchase something on your website. And it's just a way of following up with you either about that service or product, or allowing you to use the platform in the future, like Twitter. Twitter's not very helpful or useful if you don't have an account, but an account lets you interact with others on Twitter. So that's just what we mean. It can mean different things for different services, but in general, it's just providing an email address, creating a password, and sharing some personal information with a website or service in order to create a business relationship with them, whether that's to buy a shirt or to talk with reporters on Twitter. So our last question, which is a really good one, is whether or not Myspace is still an active platform. Blast from the past, MySpace. So true or false, MySpace is still an active platform.
I'd love to ask a follow-up question to this to see how many people had a MySpace account.
Yeah, I would too.
I definitely had a MySpace account.
I used to agonize over my top 5 friends. What
I had
music?
Friendster, High Five.
Oh. Can I miss LiveJournal?
Oh yeah, there's so many accounts.
Personal blogs. All right. So thanks you guys for guessing as to the right answer here. The answer is true. Myspace is still an active platform, and 72% of you got that right. 28% of you said false, and the reason is you probably just haven't heard of it recently. And that's true. I haven't heard of it recently either until MySpace had a breach a couple years ago, which was brought to the forefront of my mind, reminded me I still had an active account, and made me try to go and see if I could shut that account down. So it's always great to try to get rid of or delete old accounts once you're done using them. As you can imagine, me in 2020 trying to remember my password for my MySpace account I created when I was 13 was pretty difficult. It's much easier to do it after you've done using that service or you haven't used it in a while and you're thinking, it's probably time to cut that one off.
Great. I think we're done with the polls. We're going to jump into the actual application of this. So just a couple pro tips as we get into this section. Make sure to ask your questions in the Q&A function. Be sure to like and upvote other questions and make sure that other people have not already asked the question that you want to ask. I know that happens often and we see the same question over and over again. So please help us make Alan's life easier by just doing a little bit of a check there. And then also the other thing is when you're in the chat function, make sure you are selecting all panelists and all attendees so that you are chatting with each other, not just us, and we want to make sure that you are able to see what each other are saying. Okay, so as we get through these next ones, we're talking more on the application. So the first thing we think of when we talk about these services or products or sites that we've been a part of is, how do we find them? I sometimes think back to these old products I used to use, like Katie and I just discussed, and I'm like, I wouldn't have even remembered that unless someone had asked me if I still use that account. So we've come up with some tips and tricks on how to find these accounts that might still be active online that you might not remember. It's really common to forget which accounts we've opened and used in the past, especially if you've only used it for a short time. But you can start by searching your username or name in a browser. You can just do a Google search or any sort of web search to see where it's registered. Sometimes it shows up on the first page, sometimes the third page, sometimes the 7th page. So make sure to click through because you'll be able to see where those accounts are registered and where your email or your name might be registered somewhere else. It's a little bit tougher if you have a very common name, so I would definitely try doing usernames that are unique to the ones that you have chosen. Another option is to go through your inbox. There are a lot of emails in your spam, your junk, or your social tabs, and they hold information on accounts that you are still registered for. I would be sure to click on those, be sure to unsubscribe from the accounts or the emails, or just get a glimpse of certain services that you use that you go straight to the services site and then unsubscribe from them or delete your account, whatever it might be. But this does give a little bit more of an insight into what accounts you might have. The next one is to go through your saved logins. So whatever browser you use usually keeps track of usernames and passwords and can be a place that you look to find these accounts. So you usually have to go into your settings or your preferences of the browser and you find your passwords or saved logins. This is usually done because it's convenient and easy for you. But in this sort of a setting, it'll show you where the accounts and services and tools are so you can go back into those sites directly. The next one is to check your Google, your Live, your Facebook, your Twitter account, partially because oftentimes when you sign up for accounts, it asks you whether you want to sign in using these accounts, but also because you connect these accounts very often by adding third parties to them. If you're like me, when I used to use Twitter, I would connect it to a tool called TweetDeck. So my Twitter was connected to my TweetDeck, which showed me that I had an account with them. So I would definitely go into these accounts to see which ones you've logged in with them, which ones you have connected with them. Usually you find this in the settings function again, and then it's usually in the signing in process. Another quick tip is to find out about breaches at haveibeenpowned.com. This site really tells a user whether sites have been breached, whether they're new or they're old, associated with your name, your email address, your user account. This is helpful because then you get to potentially find accounts that you kind of forgot you had, but are in extreme danger because the account information has been leaked or otherwise. It's really good to get a glimpse of your account, but then also know, should I change my information on other sites because it was similar to this site? So I would definitely go into there to find out accounts as well. And those are just like a brief, immediate steps to look at. And then once we get there, we're gonna wanna delete our accounts on these services, on the social medias, on the sites we've been on, and sometimes it's a little bit easier than others. So the first part on websites is going into the settings, finding the option to delete, and we'll show a couple samples so you get a little familiar with this. And then you are able to just delete it. But in some cases, it's gonna ask you to disable it versus delete it. You usually always wanna delete it because that's how your actual data gets deleted. Another thing is to visit justdelete.me. And this is a site that allows you to see how to delete things online. It shows you whether things are difficult or not, and I'll show you an example of the site, and it'll take you through what to do when you want to delete something. On mobile, we talked about this. Sometimes it's as easy as deleting the app on your phone. In some cases, you actually have to go to the browser, you have to open the app or the program on there, and you actually have to delete the account physically through there. So it does involve some investigating depending on what you're using. For some sort of food delivery services, sometimes it takes more than just deleting the app. You actually have to go to the site to delete your account and then do this. So we're seeing a mix of different ideas on what to do, on how you delete, making sure that you're reading and you're checking what you need to do along the way. This is an example of justdelete.me. It shows you which sites are easy to delete and which sites are hard to delete. So the green ones here identify that it's easy to delete, whereas the red ones here are like it's quite hard to delete your account, but it does show you and give you information on how to do that. So it's a really quick and easy way to just get info no matter where you are. As well, we said we'll show examples of how to delete your accounts. This is Flickr. Many people used it in the past to store images. Recently, Flickr has changed a lot of their services so that they no longer allow you to upload more than 1,000 pictures without purchasing an account. I know some people, friends and others, have somehow have recently deleted their accounts because of this and changes in the policies. And so they've done a process very similar to this, where you click on your avatar, you scroll down to settings, and then once you get to settings, you can click on the delete your Flickr account, which is the second tab. The first one is just the settings. Just wanting to walk through and show this process because it is quite similar depending on where you go. And we have another example here of Twitter. I know people are always like, I want to get back into Twitter. I want to delete Twitter. The emotions are high. You again go into your settings. These are my personal accounts. So you would go into my account, my settings. And then as you see in the end of the tab there, all the way at the bottom, it says deactivate your account. In some cases, it'll say disable your account or deactivate your account. We really want to push for deleting your account as much as we can. Deleting is definitely the sure way that we're saying all of our data and stuff is deleted. So in a case like Twitter, we might want to check to make sure that deactivating actually does remove all of our data from Twitter or otherwise. And some of these accounts like Twitter has options. You can see a couple up from there that says you can download your data if you would like before you delete it, which some people find is a very helpful tool. So those are just examples. We'll now get into what do we think of when we actually consider our specific data, and Katie will walk us through there.
Yeah, so on your phone, whether you use an Android or iPhone operating system, you should be able to disable location sharing with a number of apps. It's a good idea to turn that off or re-examine them regularly. I often just say only while using the app, since that's all the information I want to share. But that's something to just do on the regular. And it's also a great idea to clear your location settings often. So whether you're on a browser or on your phone, it's a good idea to do that periodically since information is so highly personal. You can roughly identify an individual using only 2 locations that they go to a day. I know a lot of us are staying at home these days, but you can imagine that only one person goes from your home address to your work address every day. And so that would likely identify you as an individual. It's also a great idea to disconnect accounts from each other. I used to sign in to Spotify using my Facebook account. That was very easy, but when I wanted to stop sharing so much information with Facebook, because they track me a lot of places, I also went and disabled the connection between Spotify and Facebook. Sometimes this requires calling customer service, but it's definitely worth it. And also means that you're just sharing less information with a number of companies. So it's a great idea. Deleting your history, whether it's your browsing history, location history on your devices, is another great idea. If you want to keep some sites you go to often, a good thing to do is to bookmark them. That way they're easily available to you, but not being stored forever. But all these other sites you go to are not being stored forever on your computer, and thus, storing personal information about your thoughts and activities online. It's also a great idea to move personal information from social media accounts, or at least review what you've put on those social media accounts. Or just change the sharing settings as well. But going back and looking on Facebook and thinking, do people really need to know my exact birthday and birth year? Probably not. It's a good idea to try to keep some of that information to yourself. You can also delete personal information from Google, the website that you probably use for email and searching and a lot of other activities during the day. You can go to this site, myactivity.google.com/myactivity, which you can easily find to delete your information. And as we mentioned earlier, it's a good idea to review the number of apps that you have on your phone, but also a good idea to review the number of extensions or other add-ons you have on your browser. You may have really enjoyed a really fun browser extension a while ago that you no longer use. It's a good idea to take that off so that personal information is not being shared. So I'm going to walk you through how to remove some information from Google. So here we are at My Activity page, which you get to by going to https://myactivity.google.com/myactivity. You want to go to the sandwich icon, which is always on the left-hand side normally. And by sandwich, I just mean 3 dots or 3 lines that are making a sandwich. And you can hit delete activity by, and you can go by day and delete them. You can also open up Google Maps and hit the same sandwich icon over there on the left-hand side again to see the settings, and go to the menu, go down to Maps History or Maps Activity, hit the sandwich button again, and then you can delete your activity by day or for a specific time period. You can also select deleting the information for all time, which is a great idea if you feel like you would just like to start with a clean slate for this new decade. So that's just one great way to delete some information.
Great, thank you, Katie. So we are going to head into the Q&A portion of the call. It looks like there's tons of questions from the Q&A that we can start up leveling. Please do continue to go in, like some of the ones that you are also feeling, so we know which ones that are popular amongst this group, and we can definitely share them out loud. Katie, there was a question that came up earlier I'd love for you to verbalize your response to. Someone asked about, I have 3 different accounts. I have one that is for my work, one's for my personal, one's for my unsubscribe or other emails. What's the best process for keeping these all separate? And that, how do I, is this safe, or is this what I should do for my data?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I personally do separate my email accounts by function. So I have one that's at consumer.org for consumer reports. That's my work email. And I have one that I only use online to set up accounts or buy things. What's really great for that is I know that if an email is coming to that account, it should be from a company that I've interacted with and not a friend or colleague. And so that's just a great way to segment them. And then I have another account that's just for personal emails. So that's an email address I share with friends and family and loved ones, and I do not share with companies. The differentiation between those that personal and that like spam/retail account is not much, but it's just helpful for me to know what's coming in. And then I also know if a company's emailing me on my personal email account, then I probably didn't share it with them, and I probably shouldn't trust them. So that's just a helpful rule of the road, but that's what works for me. If you want to combine everything to one email account, you can keep it straight in your head. That also works. Mine is more organizational than anything else.
And I'll answer a couple that are coming in right now. Many individuals have asked, do you suggest using browsers like Firefox and search engines like DuckDuckGo for better privacy? I personally do use both of those because it reduces the amount of data that is captured when I'm in places. So I feel more comfortable using them, and I feel like they are better for my personal privacy. I think it is a preference on what you use, but those are great tools, and I'm going to recommend them as places that I personally think that they're good to use. The other question I'll quickly answer is, how do you delete locations captured on your phone? Locations are actually captured by so many of the apps we have on the phone. That is one of the things that I often look out for. And so I do a couple things about this. I have an iPhone, and when I go into my iPhone, if you go into your settings, you can click through on each individual app, and you can select specific details on what to share with that app. And so I would actually do this as just good phone hygiene. Every once in a while, when you do this or when you download new apps, just go through and see what data they're collecting from you. See what they're connecting to. Some of them are connecting to Siri, and I disable that. Some of them are connecting to your location settings, and I usually disable that. There are many things that are collecting the data along the way, and I would just check it out and be sure to unregister them. And then you have some applications like Twitter that are auto capturing your data depending on where you tweet. And I would go in and make sure to unselect this so that you don't, unless you really want to, that's definitely a preference. I don't want Twitter to capture my location data everywhere I tweet. So I've definitely changed the settings in there. So a lot of this really goes into the settings of the actual platform, but I would also look in the settings of the actual app on your phone to see what it's connecting to.
So one great tip that many of the attendees are sharing in the chat is that they use some slightly not accurate information when they're creating accounts, like changing your mother's maiden name, which is a great idea because that is often used as a security question and can be easily found out. So one great thing I recommend, if you would like to protect your privacy a little bit by fibbing or lying or changing names in order to protect your identity, I recommend using a password manager, which will just keep straight all of your accounts and all of your passwords for those accounts. And then you can also put in notes, you know, exactly who your mother-in-law's name is or your mother's maiden name is for these security questions. And that way you won't mess yourself up when you forget, was it Catherine the Great or was it, you know, Dr. Seuss that I said was my mother's maiden name. So that's really helpful. And then also password managers will generally tell you if your credentials were breached. So just like haveitbeenpwned.com, the password managers often supply that resource as well. So it's a great thing to use. That was one of my big 2019 resolutions, was finally to get a password manager, and it's made my life much easier.
Definitely agree with that one. Katie, there's a really popular question here saying, how can I erase old emails from Google en masse rather than individually?
That's a great question. So that's kind of tough because you don't want to delete emails that are still important to you, even if they're old. So Google, generally, if you go look at all emails, you can see the emails here, but there'll also be a box above where you can select all. I recommend selecting all and then deselecting the ones you want to save and deleting those. It might take a couple of pages to do that. You can probably only do 50 to 100 at a time, but it's really a great way to do it. And then go empty your trash. This is extremely good thing to do, since Google does use your email to see what purchases you've made in the past. And that's just really helpful information to Google, who creates ads on the web. So it's a good idea to review old emails often. Oh yeah, what password manager do you recommend? That's a great question, actually. We recently reviewed password managers for privacy and security. One of the top ones was 1Password, which is what I use and I recommend. But there's several other good ones that were in there. Maybe we should share that afterwards, or you can also look at consumerreports.com or consumerreports.org for our recent review of privacy password managers.
It's also a good time to say that we've been doing a lot of digital privacy workshops like this in the past. So we do have ones on password managers, we have one on phishing, we have them on Zoom, on video conferencing. Many of these questions we have answered in them. So we can definitely share with individuals who reach out and would like more information on those, whether it's articles or links or the recording of the content. We are happy to share them. Another question we've gotten is, my name has changed, and does the deleting function on platforms allow searches of both names? And so this is a good one to think about in terms of, my name has changed, my location has changed, things about me have changed. I would definitely be a little creative in the searching of you. But when I say searching of yourself, I mean, I would search like both names you might have owned, maybe something with your middle name if you have one, maybe something with your location. So I could search Amir Dalla, I could search Amir Dalla in New York. I could search different things that might show up different searches of myself that bring up accounts and platforms that I wanna look at and potentially delete. All right, Katie, anything else that we're seeing?
Let's see.
Oh, I will say that we will send the URLs and information after the call. So don't worry about that. I see that as a question in here. We will be sending the URLs so you can keep track of them, and the slides you can go through on your own time.
So, just a couple questions about unsubscribing from spam emails that you get. Companies are required to allow you a simple and easy way to opt out of these email communications. Usually that's at the bottom of the email. It's usually hyperlinked. Preferences is another word that companies use. So either change your preferences or unsubscribe is the language is there. And there, that link will take you to another page where either you'll be asked to change your preferences. For instance, I'm a subscriber of Washington Post, but I also don't really appreciate their marketing emails. So I will change my settings to allow newsletters about news to come through, but not marketing emails. I'm already a subscriber. I don't know why I'm getting them anyways. But for other ones, just hitting a simple unsubscribe is the best case. If you are unfamiliar with the company and you're concerned about where this link will take you, I would just apply the same sort of tools you use anytime you see a suspicious email to see whether or not it's a phishing attempt. So a phishing attempt means that someone else has targeted your email trying to get information from you. So I would hover over the URL for the unsubscribe. I would look at the URL that shows up when you click it to see what's happening. Make sure that you're interacting with bananarepublic.com and not bananarepublics.net or something that's not familiar.
Always want to be careful you don't get phished. There's a question about how to remove credit cards from vendors. And Katie, I would love to hear your answer, but the the only thing I can really think about is going into these vendors and physically removing it is sort of the best practice that I have. And I don't know if there's another way to do this.
If you don't plan to use the vendor anymore, let's say you're over Venmo, you could just delete your account. But yes, I do think that the best option is just to go individually and remove your information.
There's also a question on how do you know if your data has been deleted when you disable, deactivate, and delete, which is a great question. And this is where we put a lot of trust in corporations and organizations to actually delete it. This is where we need better digital privacy laws that actually verify that this is happening. So I'd say we're putting a lot of trust in organizations and corporations to delete this. I'd say we also need to advocate to make sure that this is happening and that there is a lot of accountability for these organizations to do so. And this is where data privacy laws come into place that help us remove it, to review it, to check on it, and that sort of process. So, you know, we don't fully know, but we do need better regulation to make sure that those are processes and are allowing us to trust these places.
What I'm concerned, sometimes what I do is either follow up with a customer service representative or I call them to see if they can indeed guarantee that my information was deleted. Deactivate is generally not the same thing, but sometimes that's the only option. And it's good to do that if that's the only thing you can do. But yeah, it's just sometimes very difficult to see whether or not they've deleted your information. Thanks, Olaf. That's my cat. Really enjoyed this webinar. Learned a lot. Yeah, my cats love webinars. One question we got in the Q&A was whether or not password managers can be hacked. So that could happen, but password managers also use a lot of encryption, which basically means that they're keeping that information private to you to help secure your accounts. So I think although it is a concern, it's a relatively remote one in my mind. In addition, it's encrypted using your own password. So you get to set the password, and if you fail, generally if you fail entering the password correctly a certain number of times, they'll terminate the account or try to reach out to you some other way. So I think it's a very secure thing to use, although anything can get hacked. Yes, so, oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna say we have time for a couple more questions. I'm rampantly trying to answer them in the Q&A. So Katie, feel free to go ahead and answer some verbally.
Yeah, so retailers sometimes do not like to let you delete your credit card information. That's because either you've recently purchased something from them, so they're trying to get that product to you, or they like to keep it on file because there's some federal regulatory guidelines around like fraud that require them to keep that information. One thing that I do often is use PayPal or Apple Pay as a way of keeping my credit card information personal to me, but also still purchasing things online from Home Depot and Walmart, etc. So that's one good thing to do, but unfortunately it is very tough. I would try to talk to a customer service representative if you're still getting pushback.
There are so many questions about Google's incognito that I'm gonna answer this one verbally because there are a lot of questions on browsers. I think incognitos and others are great features, and I definitely recommend using them when you need to or when you want to at some points. They're probably not methods for full-time browser usage, but they are definitely options when you are using your credit card or other sorts of things that you want to remain private. In general, though, I think if you want like a full-time usage, I would consider other browser options that do protect you and your data more than potentially somewhere like Google would. Not to say that Google is not good. I'm just saying that they do use a lot of data in different types of ways. And so if you are generally considering that, incognito is an option, but I would look at other browser platforms as well.
So To answer another question that's been floated a couple times, cookies are a concern, sort of. So cookies are little pieces of software code that's downloaded onto your browser when you visit a site. So that's helpful in many cases. Let's say you go to Amazon, put some things in your cart, and then leave the website, want to come back and purchase those items. A cookie is what helps Amazon remember that you've placed some tablecloths in your cart and that you are intending to possibly buy that in the future. But cookies can also be used to track you, to say that Katie went to Google and then she later went to WashingtonPost.com and then she went to ConsumerReports.org. So it's a good idea to periodically clear the cookies on your browser. It's going to be a little different for each browser, but it should be fairly easy to find. If you're struggling finding it, I also suggest Googling or DuckDuckGoing the answer. So just entering in Safari clear cookies, and it should hopefully help you out.
Yeah, and there are a lot of questions about spam email that somehow is coming, or, you know, should I unsubscribe? What if it's not working? What if it leads to more spam? So I do want to address these questions. I'm seeing a bunch of them in the Q&A. More often than not, you have signed up for something that has opened the door to these sort of spams and advertisements. There's a handy saying that says nothing is for free. And on the internet, if you give your email away, more often than not, you are gonna be introing yourself to something else. So you might not remember signing up for these advertisements, but you know, maybe when you were doing something in the fine print, it meant that it's sharing your email with other affiliates for promotional basis. I'm not saying 100% that's the case, but very often it is. And so that is a reason you might be getting some spam or some malicious email or some new phishing emails that you might not have known from the past. So that's one thing. And then, you know, when you see these emails, I would definitely unsubscribe for them. I don't believe they should lead to more spam, although I'd be clear of the phishing ones. But I would unsubscribe, and I would also mark as phishing or inappropriate or others. And the reason you want to do this is because it tells your web browser or your email account that these are inappropriate or bad emails. And as soon as you do that, and enough people do that, the account like Gmail or others will start blocking those accounts from sending out emails to other people. So you can have an impact, and many people can have an impact. So I would definitely do that. And then we've talked about this a little bit, but if you are still getting emails even after you unsubscribe, that is technically like illegal and not allowed. Like everywhere should have an unsubscribe that is definitely unsubscribing you from that. And if you want, you can report those organizations. I would try to send them to spam, but try to unsubscribe, try calling them, try reaching out to them, try everything that you can, because you definitely should not be getting emails once you unsubscribe. Okay, Katie, any last questions?
Yeah, so we're getting a lot of questions about browsers. It's a great question to have because the browser is what you're going to be interacting with all day long. I use and recommend Safari and a new browser called Brave. Both are trying very hard to protect your privacy. So I recommend them both, but Safari is also another great option. The only issue that I would raise with Chrome browser is that it's supplied by Google. And so they like to have you sign into your Google account. And so then everywhere you go online is now associated with your email account and your name, and also what you watch on YouTube, and also what you searched, and also with your location. So it's just a consolidation of a lot of information to one company. But most of these browsers are very good on security. So as far as using the browser to traverse the web, all are very, very good on security. But how much information you share with those companies is going to differ by the company. So I recommend Brave, Safari, and Firefox.
Great. Yeah, there are a lot on browsers.
Yeah.
I know that there are still tons of questions. A lot of them we've actually already answered in some forms or another within the chat, within the Q&A, and verbally. So be sure to look at those past answers if you would need to. But we are going to wrap up as we go into the final phase. Thank you all so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to be here with you, to learn with you, and then actually to just be able to share. As many of you have asked, we will be sending a follow-up email. The email will include some of the links that we have mentioned. It will include a recording of this call, and it will include the slides that we have used. This will allow you to go back at your own time and follow along with the slides and directions that Katie and I have talked to, but also be able to do this a little bit in a slower pace, because that's what's needed as you do the full searching, as you go through these platforms and sites and URLs. Also encouraging you all to suggest topics for future workshops. This is about you, and we are definitely trying to be ahead of the things that you care about. And so we love to talk about things that are both timely but are relevant to our community. And then if you are interested in sharing information about this virtual workshop, we definitely encourage you to share the slides or recording with others. Also, let us know if you're interested, and we can share other resources with you. And if you have any questions at all, please do email community@cr.consumer.org. We will be there to adhere to your questions, but please do wait a few hours while we make sure we send out all the details from today, and then we jump in to make sure there are no other outstanding questions. But if you have anything else, please do let us know. We hope you have a greatest time as we do and find these informative, and we can't wait to see you at the next one. Special thanks to Katie for being my co-host, Alan for jumping in the Q&A, and Kimberly for doing the chat. As you can see, this is a team effort. You have all been asking a lot of questions and saying a lot of comments, and we are trying to be there for you as much as we can. And I do appreciate the team for helping us do that. So thank you so much, all, and we will see you later. Bye.